Now, there's a lot of misinformation bouncing around in the JoJo community, some based on large-scale games of telephone and theory crafting that come from fans way back when the series was smaller, who had no concern for citation on why certain things happen. And one of the most infamous and widely spread cases of this comes from a flashback in Part 4, Diamond Is Not Crash, about a man who saved a young boy and his mother during a snowstorm, inspiring that kid to pick up his hairdo. Let's talk about the man who saved Josuke. So in Chapter 324 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, we get our in-universe reason for both why Josuke styles his hair into a pompadour, and why he gets so irrationally angry when someone insults it. This being back when he was 4 years old, he got really sick and his mother tried to get him to a hospital in the middle of a horrible snowstorm. Though, the car got stuck and things seemed hopeless until, from the darkness, a man with a similar pompadour and a bloodied face appeared to aid Tomoko, getting their car moving again. And all Josuke saw from this man was his hair. And so, to honor this man, he adopted his style. And as the fan theory goes, this man who appeared in the flashback and saved Josuke and his mom during that snowstorm is apparently supposed to be Josuke from a future arc blasted back in time. Some assume that this would happen during the Bites the Dust arc, given that Bites the Dust was shown to have a rewind effect to some sort of degree, but when the time came and it didn't happen, people started to assume that either Araki decided to change his mind at the last second, or just forgot about the plot point entirely. Then this mindset started to spread around the community unfiltered for years until it was picked up by new readers and assumed to be fact, with no citation on it whatsoever. And well, the theory of time-traveling Josuke seems fine on paper, to a degree. When you look at it a little bit closer and the details of the situation, you start to notice that the whole idea only spread because people weren't paying that close of attention. Starting first with the design of the man in the flashback. This guy has a bunch of very obvious indicators that he is not Josuke. Starting first, of course, with his school uniform. So the man is wearing a gakuren, or a standard Japanese high schooler uniform, which matches Jotaro's more than it matches Josuke's. And we can make an assumption, given that Moriocho at the time was a much smaller town, meaning that they probably didn't have an established school district like they do in 1999, meaning that a lot of kids had to probably go to S-City for their schooling, like Tomoko had to go to a hospital for it, and S-City, being a big school district, would probably have more standardized uniforms, with less accessory options, making his subtle pins and hairstyle stick out more as a Yankee. Though, speaking of his pins, what matters is actually the pins on his right collar. Because you see, there are pins that are common to Japanese uniforms to help identify what year a student is in. And these pins can differentiate between school district to school district. Take Jotaro's for instance. As you see, he has 2 dots on his left collar, which signify that he is a second-year high schooler, or a junior. Then you have Josuke, which is said directly at the beginning of Part 4 to be starting his first year or freshman year at Moriocho High School, hence why he has a single large anchor on his right collar. Though you might bring up the fact that the anchor doesn't represent the first year, which you could possibly be right about, but then you also have to take into account that all the pins that appear on Josuke's uniform, which represent his Yankiness and him customizing his uniform to match his own personal identity, appear nowhere on the flashback man in any way whatsoever. And so if we're just going to go with a standard, unaltered version of the Moriocho High School uniform, you then have Koichi, who has a single pin on his right collar that signifies he's the first year as well, which is very similar to the pins we find later on the flashback man. This is reinforced by the fact that during the time skip between Part 4 and Part 5, that one line becomes 3 lines to show that Koichi is in his 3rd year of high school, showing us that these pins aren't just for show. And this man in the flashback has 3 pins similar to Koichi on his right side, allowing us to make the very simple logical conclusion that he himself is a 3rd year high schooler. And given the fact that Araki always planned for Part 4 to be the story of the summer of 1999, which means that Josuke would never graduate to his 2nd year, let alone his 3rd year, it makes no sense why a time-traveling Josuke would be wearing a 3rd year uniform, especially one that is so plain and lifeless compared to the one that he normally wears. Then of course you have the fact that the uniforms as a whole are very different. As we can see in the colored scans of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that they did their best to make it so you didn't mix up his and Josuke's uniform, even going so far to make his uniform match more closely to Jotaro's color palette than it does Josuke's, as Jotaro has his dark blue, where Josuke has his warm purple. This is especially true if you factor in the pins. Though I wouldn't be doing my part in fact-checking if I didn't bring up the fact that yes, the colored scans aren't concrete evidence and I shouldn't use them directly as such, but I will bring up the fact that the anime itself also makes sure to keep the difference between Josuke and the flashback man's uniform by the pins themselves, which is reinforcing the idea that that isn't Josuke's uniform, which then reinforces the idea that that isn't Josuke. As the only part of these two characters that share any similarity is the haircut and style of dress, which Josuke specifically adopts to honor the man who saved him that day. Even though he takes up a hairstyle and dressing style that has a pre-established idea to it that would leave him to being mocked and ridiculed about it, he considers it a representation of a true hero, and that's why he gets so furious when someone mocks them. Which, funny enough, actually plays really well into the whole hierarchy culture that is found within the Yankee subculture, which Josuke actually borrows a lot from. As you see, this is a subculture where the senior is the superior and you must respect them in all ways possible. This includes emulating them to some degree. But also, style is very important for the Yankee. It's either how they dress or how they shape their hair. Everything about their image is their everything. So much so that they're willing to break Japanese standards and traditions just to express who they are deep down. It's so important to them that when someone insults a piece of their clothing, ruins a bit of their clothing, steps on their shoes, insults their hair, this isn't just insulting a piece of fabric, it's insulting this person's entire being, along with, in most cases, insulting who they look up to, which then usually results in a violent outburst, which is represented quite well with Josuke. And it's the reason that Yankees are considered delinquents. But a very different type of delinquent that is like Jotaro. So with the understanding that this man in the flashback is absolutely not Josuke, nothing about it lines up, some might ask why this scene was added to the manga at all if it wasn't used to foreshadow some sort of event in a future part. Well, you see, it's because this scene carries a message to it. The same one found in the next part, Golden Wind, when Giorno saved, then was protected by, and ultimately began to idolize an unnamed faceless mobster. The man in the flashback here is just an unnamed Yankee, a simple Japanese delinquent, someone isolated from most of society, coming away from what must have been a rough day with an even rougher fight, and you wouldn't instantly expect to show a random act of kindness. Araki wanted to use someone with this sort of appearance to show the beauty and kindness of all of humanity, which plays into the themes of Part 4 and Josuke by not judging a book by its cover, along with playing nicely with JoJo's own Ode to Life and a celebration of humanity themes that Araki mentioned the series being about. As even those who appear on the outside to be troublemakers and violent in this world, deep down, could be good-natured and kind. Be it the idiot Okuyasu, the con man Tamami, the mangaka Rohan, the biker Yuya, the chef Tonio, or just some random dude willing to sacrifice a piece of himself to help a woman and a kid get out of a bad situation before disappearing into the darkness himself. All of them have that golden spirit within them, the one that courses through others without a word, the golden heart of Morio that we saw the first beat of from a faceless delinquent that inspired a young boy to do great things in the future.
Oh yeah, and Araki also said it literally wasn't Josuke in an interview he did with Kubo in 1994, so I thought that was also kind of important. But if I brought that up too early, then this video would have like nothing. Alright.
And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/ManyNotTheBadGuy. And if you want to help a woman and her kid get out of a snowstorm, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, a boring world where the contradictory jokes doesn't exist. Use as many copies of the DVDs to get them get their snow tires out of the snow, and you'll have a great day. Have Shimonetta be the golden heart of Morio.